this takes me to like kind of stringing together of like what are the actual characteristics of a super app.
Yeah.
So I was reading there's a website that kind of talks about like tech trends in Asia. The website's techinasia.com, but they have an article on super apps that I highly recommend. And they have like 5 components that are like the characteristics of a super app. So I'll read them. There's like one that jumps out at me. But if you think about all of these, like if you think about the end user goal of a super app, it's just to create a unified, seamless experience, right? To limit toggling and just help users get stuff done. Almost so like productivity and efficiency is like one of the most important factors. So these are the 5 that I wanted to get your take on. So the first is the app should have at least one service or function that has a high open rate. So for Grab or WeChat, that's actually the chat functionality.
Yeah.
Super apps need to own their own users' wallets. So, a storefront built, you should really think of it as like WePost is a storefront built on top of a payment app rather than a payment experience built into a website. So that seamlessness is something that I think separates it. Partnerships are openness are critical. So I think that kind of goes without saying, right? The more integrations you have, the more seamless you can do, and the more opportunities to kind of meet more of users where they're at. They need to allow partners to succeed. So there's also, this is like the integrations. So I think this like a good example is if we think about like maybe places where integrations haven't been great. I think maybe how Facebook has handled Instagram, where Instagram was really this like creator-based company, and now
Yeah.
people feel like it's really gotten away from its creative roots and it's kind of polluted with ads and like it's lost its real value to creators. Maybe that's a hot take, but I think that's how a lot of my friends that are like full-time creators feel about it. So I think that's an example of like not allowing a partner to succeed. I know that's an acquisition, so it's a little different, but still relevant. And then the last is super apps need to go deep on multiple verticals. So it doesn't just offer surface level finance products like a mobile wallet, but it also has like a bunch of other stuff that you can do to become more effective. So
That's really interesting. Like, it's interesting that it was a payment platform that evolved to other services, because the payment part is usually the most complicated for any of service. Like, how do you get the money from A to B? That's, dealing with fraud and all of that. That's usually really complex. So it's interesting that that was the starting point, and then because they have that figured out, adding the other layers on top becomes a lot more straightforward. So you think PayPal, in which case, or what's the other one that you lot use in America? I forget. There's
Venmo.
another set. Yeah, Venmo. Was it Venmo? That would seem like if they were to replicate that. Well, then I suppose PayPal kind of did, because when they were connected to eBay, right?
Venmo is owned by Venmo is PayPal.
Oh, it's PayPal as well.
Yeah, so I think eBay at one time owned PayPal, then PayPal split, but PayPal and Venmo are the same. The other big one is now Cash App, which is owned by Square, which is Twitter.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, so
Um,
those are like the 2 rival like Gen Z millennial payment apps.
so you could see they would have the potential if they were to follow that way. Because I remember speaking to one of our earlier guests. They were working on a payment service uh, in Amsterdam. So you can see like their biggest thing was always creating the APIs that allow developers to do it. So if you imagine that you actually just create the whole service and someone could just come in and plug in their app and it just works, and then that makes the usability for users work. So I suppose the question is, why do we think it's not really working in the West, or like why doesn't that really happen here? I suppose one of the biggest challenges is iOS, right? Because iOS is fast becoming the most successful mobile platform in the West for sure. Partly because Apple allowed for the second-hand market to exist, and they actually support older devices. So like they support the iPhone 6s, right? And that was released when, back in 2015, which is quite good if you think about it. That's like almost a 6-year-old phone that's still being supported by the platform, and that means that, all right, Apple might not make money from the selling of the phone, but they'll make money from the Play Store, like, and then they'll make money for the apps because people are more likely to spend money on an iPhone than they are on Android. I remember that data a long time ago, because it's a lot more disposable income, and so the iPhone kind of has the iPhone itself is a super app the way it locks down everything because it's very restrictive in what it allows. So I can see that that's like a thing that stops folks from doing stuff. And I suppose the other thing is like regulation. That's I mean, I'm looking at an article on UX Planet and they were talking about the super app. And so regulation is also a big thing, like competition laws. If a company, because there's anti-monopoly, what's they call it, anti-monopoly. Because remember years ago, Microsoft got into trouble, and like the US government just kept taking them to court to like break them up and stuff. Maybe there's an element of that where it requires a lot more openness, because if one person controls the entire platform, that's like, imagine if it's just one browser, right? Like that's a lot of power.